So I've done 23 deals in the last 36 months. We'll be north of 30 by the end of 2026, Dave. The largest deal I did was 20 million in enterprise value.
Geoff Bruskin runs White Tiger Connections. He buys and sells accounting firms for a living. This is his read on the market right now.
White hot, super hot, never been hotter before. 1 to 1.5 times gross was before private equity came into the profession in 2021. We've seen things rise, they're continuing to rise. 7 and change is high, especially for a business that's got like $1 million of EBITDA. That's extremely high in this space.
If you own a firm and you've never had it value, you're guessing at the biggest number in your life. Welcome to Growing Your Firm. Hey everybody, David Cristello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is a returning guest. Geoff, is this third time? Fourth time? Maybe
Number 3.
interviews? 3 interviews, and you've been at a summit, and you've been at our M&A summit. You're talking about deal flow, which was really exciting. For folks that are not familiar with your work, give us a 60-second overview of who you are and what you do.
Yes, so thank you for having me again, Dave. I've had a few people say, I heard you on the Jetpack Workflow podcast. So that would Growing Your Firm podcast. So the Jetpack Workflow guy. So I know that the name is getting out there because of you. So thanks, man. So I'm Geoff Bruskin. I run White Tiger Connections. We are an M&A advisory, management consulting, and executive recruiting firm. We exclusively service public accounting firms and firms that have a thesis in public accounting. So M&A, we buy and sell CPA and accounting firms and advise on the sale, even if we don't source the practice. Recruiting, we'll do about 35 to 40 placements of public accounting professionals this year. The most kind of voluminous search is the tax manager or the senior tax manager, successor to a partner who's retiring. Our whole recruiting practice is fully remote. So our thesis is there is no talent crisis once you unlever geography. So we do a lot of recruiting for RIAs and private equity that are buying accounting firms where the sellers lack native succession and they need the recruiting. We do a bunch for accounting firms as well. And then management consulting. So Dave, I have 8 now fractional COO engagements with CPA firms. The smallest is $1.2 million in revenue. The largest is $20 million in revenue. 2 are PE roll-ups. 1's wholly owned by an RIA. The other 5 are independent, and I'll probably be at 10 by the end of this month. The COO thing is super interesting for CPA firms that are looking to kind of create infrastructure for scale. That's what I do.
All right, lot to unpack. And I know we started this interview thinking, okay, let's get into the state of M&A for 2026. And I do want to get there, and I want to know what's changed, what's improved, what's gotten better or worse with, obviously PE's been really big, but AI just keeps chugging along. And you have all these forces that are making M&A really interesting and exciting. That said, let's unpack this fractional COO. You've been ramping this up, and it's a bit of a new, territory for us. Now, we're in workflow land. We're obviously a big fan of this kind of fractional COO mentality. But when somebody's hiring you, what are the symptoms of the problem they're experiencing that says, yes, I need a Geoff on my bench to help me with X? What are the pain points that say I need to hire a Geoff?
So I got my first COO engagement a little over a year ago, and it was with a client of mine. I'd run their retreat, and 8-partner firm, about 20 million in revenue, and they were considering hiring a full-time COO and using my recruiting firm to source that individual. And as I was scoping the project with them, they wanted somebody deep expertise in public accounting. They wanted someone who understood the technology landscape and accounting really specifically, workflow management software, tax software, CRM, the guts of the workflow itself. So everything from client discovers the firm exists to a signed engagement letter and building out a kind of a fully automated go-to-market CRM process. And then they were on the CCH suite, super dissatisfied with a lot of the portal and practice and love access. But, a lot of the other things in the family leaves a lot of room to be desired. And so thinking more dynamically about that, threading the whole thing together. And then there was a whole bunch of we don't know, do we want to buy? Do we want to sell? Where is this whole thing going? Do we want to start a wealth management practice? Do we want to start an estate planning practice? We've got partners retiring. We need to overhaul our pricing. We need to overhaul our billing. We need to figure out how to hire remotely. We need to start better cross-selling CAS to our existing tax clients. There's so many things. And it was like, let's slap a COO executive search on this, and it's going to solve all of our problems. And what I helped them realize, Dave, was like that the expertise that they're looking for really doesn't exist. It does exist perhaps if we say hire somebody remotely, but this is a local firm, and they wanted the COO to be physically in the office and be able to build great relationships with people. And just for the amount of money that they were willing to spend, I was like, I don't think you're going to get what you're looking for. Why don't you hire me fractionally? I think I can do everything that you want, and then it's going to cost you like a third of how much it would be if you hired this person full time. And I can take all of that budget, hire a second person underneath me to work full time in the business who's just in a technology role. So I can manage that person actually doing a lot of the build stuff. And you can almost have like an internal technology department as opposed to needing to go to agencies to build out all of these different things that you're talking about. We choose the right tools, we thread them together with bidirectional synchronization, we can build those automations, and then you'll still have money left over at the end of it. And I'm also an expert in all these things you're talking about. And so the engagement always looks something like we have a bunch of things that we've identified that are ways of improving the firm. Technology is at the center of it. Better data, better attribution is at the center of it. And so is the ability to kind of shepherd our people, because change management is ultimately a personnel thing. It's an adoption thing. It's getting everybody rowing in the same direction, and CPAs are not one to kind of want to change something very quickly. So you have to get buy-in. So that it's the technical depth and it's the human element, and in that, yeah. So that's how I like to work.
So the person, is it pretty common you would hire somebody full-time or fractional to be embedded in the firm that you're consulting with from a technology implementation oversight perspective?
So that is one of my brighter ideas. I think that every accounting firm should have a solution architect internally, someone who the strategic leaders can delegate kind of the highest value accretion activities to, and that person can be motivated to be the in-house implementation champion for new technologies, in-house AI implementation person for workflows inside of a technology or workflows between technologies, because this theory of, hey, CCH or Thomson Reuters or Carbon or Taxdome or anyone for that matter is going to be able to do everything that you need inside of one product, and it's all going to flow together super seamlessly. It doesn't exist. There's always multiple systems that you need to be interacting with each other really well, and you need to get adoption from all of your people into multiple systems. And so, yes, this tech person is a really vital thing.
What's the price of full-time hire for a solutions architect at an accounting firm? Obviously the one you mentioned is scaled to 20 million, and we can kind of play like, well, if you're a 10 or 5 or 1, you're going to go to a fractional hire or whatever. But let's just start with an all-in. What does that person, what would you invest in somebody like that?
60 to 150 grand. You could get a rock star, awesome person in India for $80,000. You could get an extremely competent person in a suburban, rural part of the country for $80,000. You could get somebody who's unbelievable for $125,000 in the States. 60 to 150, depending on what you need.
And the 120 is somebody that you would say to them, "Hey, I need a new, document management system, go." And they're like, "Got it, I understand it." Versus a 60, 70K would be, I need a document management system. Here's how I want you to scope it out. Here's who I want you to talk to. Here's the script to it. You have to like kind of handhold them more. Is that fair to say? Because it's a pretty broad range, right? I guess is what I'm getting at. So like, what do you kind of get practically for a 60, 70K versus a 125, 130K?
It's such a good question. I should be better at answering that. I'm going to say it depends. You're always going to want to spend a lot of time on the front end of any engagement, talking through with the person, whether they're 60 grand or 150 grand, what you need and why you need it. I think that ultimately the 10 out of 10 at 60 versus the 10 out of 10 at 150, the 150 is going to be much more capable of kind of uncovering problems or opportunities during their research, during their implementation that you didn't anticipate when you were scoping this, and in real time bringing things to you, making suggestions to you, troubleshooting for you dynamically, and you not needing to be as involved with them from an oversight perspective. You're always going to need to be very involved as you set them off, but the oversight, the increments of feedback that you're looking for, less management throughout a project's life cycle.
Yeah. Well, there's, like you mentioned in your example, these firms, I mean, there's so much opportunity, better defined processes, better tech stack, service opportunities, expanding services, launching new services. How do you come in and drive priority? How do you pick what's first? What's the criteria or framework or shorthands you use to build a operations, COO roadmap of things you're going to tackle first, second, and third?
So we don't need to do one thing at a time. We can actually be in a lot of different places at one time. And one of and I know this wasn't directly your question, but it's related, Dave. One of the most common questions I get is, how do you have time for this? Actually, right before the recording of this, I just got off an hour call with a PE CEO and who just bought an 8-figure firm, and we're in a conversation about this. And he's like, how much time am I going to get from you? It's not a time thing. I have a team that works with me. There's so much that I can do with AI, and this is right, very relevant for the CPA firms that we talk to and how we advise them. You get away from time-based billing, right? It's much more about impact. There is a technical backbone of expertise that I have. It's maybe 20% of the work that I do. 80% of the work is on the human management side. So that's working with the executives, working with the next executives, and working with the managers. And a lot of that change management happens with relationship development between me and the managers, so that once the priorities are set from the executives, the managers are the future of the firm, and they have the time and the ambition to want to bring the firm into the next generation. They're also going to be a part of it 5 and 10 years from now, unlike many of the executives who are getting ready to retire. So that adoption, that evangelism from the managers to be the czar for new technology and the czar for new workflow dynamics and pricing and billing dynamics and anything else which you're going to do in the firm is so paramount. And it's so much of that's relationships. So I'll make committees. The committees will be responsible for the actioning of the priorities, and I'm like the neck between the managers who are the executives who I'm aligning the stakeholder with, and then the lower end managers who are actually doing a lot of the implementation along with me, and my team that comes along with me. But to your question directly, Dave, about priorities, so there's usually opportunities that we can attack that are like offensive, and then there's areas of the business that are hemorrhaging, where there's a need to focus defensively. And so I try to figure out what are the biggest defensive things that we need to just start working on immediately to stabilize the operation, and then what are the biggest opportunities that we can attack, the least amount of effort for the most amount of return, even just from a trajectory standpoint, where we're foolish to not start going down this road. Like the wealth management thing for businesses, for CPA firms that have a huge tax division, is so powerful. You do the financial pro formas when it works, and it's ridiculous, like 3 to 4x enterprise value and cash flow accretion in many cases. On like a 3 to 7 year timeline, you see what the firm value looks like, and it's just mind-boggling. And there are obstacles, and we've got to address them, and we get a lot of referrals from these people, and there's a lot of things to consider, but they're surmountable. So I try to address both of those things at one time, and then we can do a lot in a limited period.
Yeah. Hey, Growing Your Firm family, David here. Quick question for you. What's the status of every client project in your firm right now? If that question makes you nervous, you need Jetpack Workflow. Jetpack Workflow gives accounting firms a single place to manage recurring work, track deadlines, assign tasks, and keep the entire team aligned. Stop chasing status updates and run a more organized firm. Visit jetpackworkflow.com to start your free trial or schedule a demo today. What's an example of, or what are some of the most common, like you mentioned, wealth management and offense, so I'm curious if you have one other one, but what are the most common offensive measures and defensive measures that you've seen surfaced across your clients, or just even more broadly in the industry? What surfaces for you there?
So two other offensive ones other than wealth management. One is just pure net new business development. So how many CPA accounting firms do you know that have a rich go-to-market strategy? Probably very few.
I mean, it's probably on one hand. I'd have to think about it, and it would probably be on one hand.
It's right, and it's because everyone suffers with the same thing, which is capacity. So imagine, right? I run a recruiting firm. There actually is plenty of talent out there. It's just they're not in any zip code. They're in every zip code. So you have to unlever geography. You have to have systems that support that technology, workflow, SOPs, and then you have to hire the best 1% to 2% of people in the country. But those people are actually everywhere because there are so many CPA and accounting firms that don't do things the right way. They overpromise, they underdeliver, they kill their people, and there's no growth. So I find those people. You can too. And so hire the best people into an environment where they're going to be able to be successful. There's not a capacity issue anymore. So on the other side of that, go to market aggressively with a sophisticated go to market. That's one offensive opportunity. The other is better cross selling. So all of these firms that, plenty of firms we know that do tax and accounting, but accounting or tax is the majority of their revenue. I have a firm that just came to market today, actually, which 100% of their revenue is subscription, and all of their clients use their full offering, tax and accounting. And there's a base tier and a supersized tier, but you have to buy everything or you're not a client of theirs. That business is going to go for a multiple, which is double what I'm seeing a lot of the firms that only have one, functional area go for, because it's a micro platform, could be a macro platform if it scales. So that's the other offensive thing. Defensively, I would say refreshing pricing and billing is something that I'm seeing constantly. Taking a firm that bills by time or bills with a focus on realization for bills for specifically about profitability. The metrics are more tied to profitability, and there's actually like billing narrative stuff that we can do so that clients aren't receiving like inventories of hours, but they're actually like they're getting like an explanation for all of their savings, for the research time, which associated with the absence of XYZ penalties that they would have to pay. So you can control a lot of the client narrative in the way that you bill. You can also use billing as a platform to successfully cross-sell. So there's a ton of opportunity in billing. Another defensive thing that I see is like actually document architecture. So many people are unhappy with their portal of all things, and so just better workflow, better portal is another thing. And then the third thing I would say is like we all talk endlessly about the automation of document collection and the automation of prep over the last 12 months. Like even Soroban, Blackor, TaxDome's internal tools. There's so many tools out there that are doing this now. It's just getting to the point where it actually integrates well inside of the workflow. It's really had a lot of stutter steps in the first couple of years of its existence, and so actually massaging that so that these AI tools, these AI workflow tools, are actually saving time and not just like this fancy shiny object. Working a lot with that right now.
For sure. And I want to get into M&A, especially as you talked about that deal you're working on right now. But really, really quick, where are you personally using or being most impressed with AI as it pertains to your work? You're talking about management consulting, data room development, recruiting. Are you, using, co-work and ChatGPT for certain use cases? I mean, like, I guess what's your internal state of AI today? Where are you seeing the most interesting time savings or impact?
So for me, and I am not the best example in my business. I'm actually hiring somebody right now who I've got I have an open position for somebody who's smarter about AI than me. But my biggest use for it, Dave, is content creation. So I run everything, both emails, LinkedIn posts, anything that I put out. I try to run it through AI to just make it more digestible and grammar and punctuation, like easy stuff. And then the other thing is the deliverables on my consulting work. So I got a project recently where I had to I have a 5-layer project for the IT group of one of my larger consulting clients that we want to build a lot more sophistication in how that IT group essentially maps all of the internal systems that it has so that we can be GLBA, ultimately SOC 2 compliant, and be equipped to double the size of the firm, and pro forma what that's going to look like from a cost and a risk standpoint. And so, inventory of all systems, way that those systems interact with one another, security clearance for the systems, so that we can figure out what we can delegate away from the director onto the people inside of his organization, a calendar for renewals, and cost, and suggested areas for improvement, and then taking all of this stuff and putting it into a format where we can present it to the shareholders on a quarterly basis, in terms of just like almost like your IT newsletter, like what are the most interesting things or pressing things, price change things, new product adoption things that you need to be thinking about in 200 words or less. AI, right? It's taking what would have taken me hundreds of hours to do, and it does it in like 20 minutes, as long as I get all of the right inputs in there. And so much more of it is about intake, and then the output is rote now. So that's where I'm using it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's dig into M&A. You talked about this deal earlier, which is kind of, maybe in some ways the quintessential deal. Everybody buys all the packages, it's subscriptions. Let's just unpack that one, and then we'll unpack the broader industry. So what's the recurring revenue on that firm, and what's the asking price on it?
2.7 million top line, 1.25 seller discretionary earnings. Well, we're putting adjusted EBITDA at 1.1, because the two owners only spend 20% of their time in the business. So $150,000 adjustment for the equivalent of one executive 40% of their time is how we come up with that 150 subtracted 125 is 1.1 adjusted EBITDA. All of the clients are fully remote, no key client concentration, right? 3% of the business is the largest client. And the space that the niche that the clients are in is super interesting as well. 5 CPAs on staff, including 2 leaders. Like it's a fully packaged micro platform for a wealth management group, a private equity firm to do its first acquisition, and then be able to grow because the model is so secure. So the asking on that is $8 million. 6 million cash at close, 1 million of seller financed revenue retention based earnout over the first 12 months, and then the final $1 million rolled equity.
Got it. And what's the niche?
50% of the businesses are fully remote professional services agencies, marketing, recruiting, and the other 50% is digital influencers.
So 2.7 top line, you kind of unpacked all the inputs for that, and the EBITDA, but asking price is 8 million. Obviously you put together, so you're like, this is like price to sell, and anybody who gets this is going to get a great business. Is this the top of the multiple like folks can get? Is essentially two and some change multiple on top line? Is this kind of the highest multiple you would see kind of listed at, or have you seen more, or is this one kind of average for you? Like where's this sit today?
So this is high for sure. But most of my deal flow is large. So I've done 23 deals in the last 36 months. We'll be north of 30 by the end of 2026, Dave. The largest deal I did was 20 million in enterprise value. The smallest deal I've done is $250,000. Average deal is probably $1.5 million to $2 million in EV. So this is on the higher side of average for me. The multiple for this one is high. I also serve as an advisor to several middle market private equity firms who have like hundreds of millions to deploy. They're looking for large 8-figure EBITDA firms. I have seen multiples as high as like 17, 18, 19 times adjusted, in terms of what the tier 1 investment banks are bringing to like the true enterprise private equity firms.
So what's the multiple on this one? Because I'm still stuck in SaaS land, which I don't think is relevant anymore, but they would do multiples on top line. So what's the multiple on this business?
So this is like 7 and change, 7.4 something is this one. I would say I sell a lot of businesses at like 4 times adjusted EBITDA, 5.2 times adjusted EBITDA. I have one closing in a couple of weeks, which was 5.75 times adjusted EBITDA. 7 and change is high, especially for a business that's got like $1 million of EBITDA. That's extremely high in this space. and the top line multiple here is like 3, right? So 2.7 times 3 is 8.3 million. So we're just shy of 3. Um, so, but typically, I mean, 1 to 1.5 times gross was before private equity came into the profession in 2021. We've seen things rise. They're continuing to rise. But a lot of people today are buying at 4 to 6 times adjusted EBITDA, something I hear regularly, and their plan is to sell at 8 to 12 times adjusted EBITDA once they, buy 5 businesses at $1 million, and now they have 5 million of adjusted EBITDA, and that they're going to exit at 10 times where they've bought it at 5. And so that kind of stuff is super plausible, especially when you see multiples getting capped at 18, 19, 20 times. And the more EBITDA you have, truly, the more you kind of start playing ball with the highest valuation services like that are ancillary to your sector. So wealth management is like the gangbuster one right now, that in some cases you're talking 21, 22, 23 times adjusted. And like in the most dramatic cases, you're talking like that's like 5 times gross, which is comparable to like what the software world did, although now everyone's saying SaaS is dead. My thesis, which is a hot take, is that professional services in 5 years, like in 2030, will actually be the same thing as a technology company, because you have all of the technology which is baked into the firm. Not only does that raise the margin, but you can deploy technology into the client base because you have trust, which Facebook and Netflix and Nvidia, they don't have the trust of their clients. A CPA firm, a wealth management firm, a law firm does. And so, there's some questions about like what's going to be automated and obviously what can be brought in house. Do I need a lawyer anymore, for my $50 million company, or can I automate my entire legal with an in-house counsel plus AI? There's meaningful crosswinds to my thesis, but I think that some of the protection against that is the platform business model where you have multiple ancillary interconnected offerings: wealth management, tax, accounting, estate planning, outsourced HR, etc. And you've got both advisory and compliance depth across multiple services. It is extremely hard to replace that. You're the entire business for somebody. You can do everything, and all they have to do is their expertise. They don't need any of the subordinate functions. I would pay $250,000 a year for something like that. So that's where I see more of the market going.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I guess, just to sit back in armchair where we go over the next couple of years, because I think and I mean, maybe in a longer term too, but in the short term, I think professional service firms, accounting firms, I mean, they're just going to crush it, for lack of a better word. I mean, with where we are potentially going with the agentic workflows that are happening every week, there's a new one on tax prep, for example. So, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after, it's going to happen. I don't know what year. It's like self-driving. You don't know what year it is, but it's coming, and people are pouring a lot of money into it, and that's going to allow you to scale and drive better margins and better profitability. And so I think there's just huge leverage over the next couple of years for firms that kind of, in the beginning, do proof of concepts, tinker, maybe don't fully deploy, but they test it out, and when it's ready for real general availability, they go into it, and then all of a sudden they just see cash pouring from their firm, essentially, as margin improves. But on the flip side, like you said, software companies are getting hammered because of this pesky thing called per user per person subscriptions, right? And so, Wall Street is so skeptical of the future of how many people would need to work in a business. Therefore, the per user forecasting is no longer as stable as it once was. And so all the software companies are getting hammered, and they don't take that lightly. So what do? They think about building their own, or white labeling their own agents. And guess what? They're just thinking about how much of the salary can we carve into that we will help augment in the firm. So if we're charging $500 per year for our seat, or $1,000 or $1,200 per year for our seat, if we can provide the automated agentic receptionist, and that agent can do half of what the receptionist is doing today, well, I'm going to charge $2,000 a month for that. And so They're trying to figure out, well, A, they have to deploy the technology. It's not there. It's there in some cases. It's not there entirely. But then B, accounting firms are going to get that margin, but then technology companies are going to be like, we actually want that margin back because we've just been getting hit up so much or hit down on valuations, on liquidity. So I think it's going to be really interesting, kind of like the give and take. I don't mean to position it as something that's combative. I think it's going to be very collaborative where the market clearing price lands for these agentic experiences. But that's what's happening. I think margins are going to actually improve even more.
I agree.
For firms, but then software companies are going to figure out how to continue to get usage based, agentic kind of experiences. And if you've tinkered with these tools, I have tinkered with a lot of prototyping tools, vibe coding tools, and all of a sudden, I'm 3 days into it, and I went from $29 a month to $300 a month in 72 hours, right? Because I want to get the darn thing done, and so all of a sudden it just ramps up aggressively, and I'm like, and then I have 3 of these different models running. I'm like, dear God, I'm spending $1,000 a month on this thing, and I didn't even have a budget in my mind when I was starting this, but they just kind of hook you in. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where all the margin goes to over the next couple years. Hey, David here. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. Did you know that we run the Growing Your Firm newsletter, where we not only publish upcoming podcasts and episodes, but it's where you get invited to the summits that we hold multiple times a year. These are virtual summits. They are free. And we do things like the AI Summit, the Advisory Summit, the M&A Summit. Go to jetpackworkflow.com, click that Learn button, and make sure you sign up for the Growing Your Firm newsletter.
Fascinating stuff. And that's a Claude co-work exercise for you when you're talking about the agents that you built, right?
Yeah, so I mean, here's a very practical example. So I have this new project going on. We've talked about it. You were nice enough to introduce me to a couple of folks that might benefit from it. And we're spinning up a new website, and so I decided to use Webflow. Whatever, they're all kind of the same: WordPress, Webflow, Framer, this, that, and the other thing. So I'm using Webflow, and I don't want to go in and tinker with Webflow. So I go on Upwork, I find a Webflow developer, and I started giving this person some small things to update. And then I'm like, what am I doing? I open up Cowork, I connect Webflow, which is 3 button clicks, connect Webflow to Cowork, and then I ask Cowork, how can I make this page more visible for answer engines? List out 12 things, just like, frankly, ChatGPT would. If you're doing a chat, the difference is it then goes, do you want me to code up the schema markup that will make your blog post more visible for answer engine? I'm like, yes, do that. And then I see it list out the steps on the side. Here are the 5 steps I need to do. And it runs through it and documents its work. It pushes it to staging, and it goes, well, if you want to publish it to production, go into Webflow. I always have the ability to hit publish. So, I mean, for a week straight, I would go in every day. What else can I do? What else can I do? I just published a blog post. Take a look at it. Is it going to rank well on Google? And if not, why? Well, you didn't put image alt text on some of these images in your blog post. Do you want me to do that? Yes, I would love for you to do that. Great, it goes and does that. You don't have a lot of internal links on this post. Do you want me to add some internal links? Sure. It doesn't have an FAQ section. You want me to have? Yes, sure. And it's writing up all these things and deploying it out. So, doing that, I'm like, well, this is certainly the future. I think there is going to be that service layer for every piece of knowledge work that we can do. And so yeah, my tool of choice right now is Cowork. I try to put as many things through Cowork as possible.
I haven't seen anything which comes close in the last month, right? I mean, it's only been the hype has been 60 days old or whatever, I don't know, as of April 6th, but there's nobody who comes close right now.
Yeah. I mean, the beginning of the year has been just crazy for that. Well, Geoff, final couple questions on M&A. Are multiples still rising? Is it still a very aggressive market overall for getting deals done? Is it starting to slow down a little bit? I mean, what's the current temperature in Q2 of 2026?
White hot, super, super, super hot. Never been hotter before. There's a little, and I think part of the reason for that is there's some uncertainty about what's going to happen. Some people, the war in Iran, some people are nervous about. AI, everybody's nervous about. The midterms in the U.S. are coming up November of this year, right? There's some people who are selling their businesses that I know now that are thinking that now could be a good time to sell because maybe the midterms will combined with AI, combined with the global socioeconomic situation, might do something. There's speculation and uncertainty. So when there's speculation and uncertainty, that drives dynamism in the market, and we're definitely on a great kick right now as far as multiples and just general buy side tenacity is concerned. Professional services is extremely hot. The CPA and accounting profession, which has had lower multiples than other professional services agencies, has been seen as a really great entrance thesis to then be able to build out perhaps broader interconnected services. If you have a payroll thesis, if you have a SaaS thesis, if you have a wealth management thesis, starting in tax or accounting is seen as a great place to start because the price of entry is less. And so never been hotter, both from a demand volume standpoint. There's just a ton of people who are interested, different kinds of people. The volume is high, and then the qualitative multiple itself is continuing to rise.
Has it been? I mean, at what point do we know? When will PE start trading again to see? Because there's all this skepticism from people in the space. Oh, PE is going to come in. They're not going to know how to operate these businesses. They think it's so easy. Da 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 da. Have you seen data points to say whether that's been proven out that they didn't trade as aggressively as they thought when they retraded, or no, they were right. They came with the thesis and they just nailed it, and they're doing well. Have you seen any data points about these kind of PE plays?
So I have heard data points. The failures tend to be much quieter than the successes are.
There have been failures.
There have been failures, yes. Many, yes. I would say maybe 40% of these PE theses fail, right? And that's not counting how many hundreds and thousands of theses never start, right? There's a ton of, and I'm even inclusive of I have multiple clients, past clients for that matter, Dave, who had 9 figures of capital to deploy and who never entered into this space. All the way down to search fund operators or guys with, the SBA as a relationship who never deployed. But of the ones that do, I would roughly guess 30 to 40% of them fail or are in the process of failing, meaning that anything from all the key executives leave and they're left with a pile of nothing in their hands to they're ultimately able to do something to stop the bleeding, but then they're going to end up trading at a massive loss because they've failed on the human side of this. Too dramatic price increases, too dramatic change management from a software perspective. Just cultural pressure, staff leave, clients follow, all of the things that people hypothesize. It is happening. It's just the best firms are able to premeditatively address those things, and 85, 90% client retention, same on the staff side. They're actively investing from a talent perspective, handling change the right way when it comes to new software adoption, et cetera. So there's a lot of success, more success, I think, than failure, but plenty of failure too.
Yeah, that's amazing. So everybody's right. There's players that have come in. I mean, it's just a spectrum. There are players that have come in, high quality players, been there, done that. You invest in the people. They don't try to break everything at once. They go slow and they've kind of aggressively but methodically kind of got their value creation thesis played out. And then there's others that kind of came in with a wrecking ball and did not work. So I guess some of the fears were warranted, is what you're saying. Because I've heard nothing, right? I'm not in this world as deeply as you are. If our audience wants to reach out, say thank you for coming on, look into, you mentioned M&A, you mentioned recruiting, you mentioned Fractional COO. What's the best way for our community to connect with you?
So LinkedIn is great, Dave. You can find me GeoffBruskin, Jeff with a G, Bruskin. White Tiger Connections, easy to remember.
Yeah, very cool. And I highly recommend you follow Jeff. We were just talking early on. He puts out a lot of content around best practices, thought leadership, and M&A recruiting, just state of the industry. But my personal favorite, he's been putting deals out on LinkedIn. It's gotten me itchy. Oh my gosh, even I want to buy an accounting firm now. He's just putting out this deal with this thing and this multiple. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be so great. So I highly encourage you to follow him. I think if you just see these deal posts and nothing else, it really will give you a taste of what's going on in the market, kind of what's kind of the multiples you'll see out in the space. So I highly recommend you connect with him there. We'll link up your website and everything else. If you want a full recap of the episode, go to jetpackworkflow.com/blog. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave a review, share it, help us get the word out. And Jeff, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Take care.